A lot of the things that currently make money will not make money in 5 to 10 years. You don't know it's just happened. Your life is going to fundamentally change. If a tsunami was about to hit the shore, you move your family out of the way. This is not the time to rest. This is the time to paddle like crazy and surf this thing. You need to work as hard as you possibly can without burning out.
What is the problem with businesses not utilizing AI?
AI is the biggest thing that has ever happened in our lives. And we've had big things happen in our lives. We've had mobile phones, and we've had social media, and we've had internet, and we've had global financial crises and pandemics and all of that sort of stuff. All of that felt pretty disruptive at the time. AI is going to disrupt absolutely everything. So if you're in business or if you're in a career, you've got to assume that you are currently on borrowed time, that AI is going to, in some way, small, medium, or large, going to disrupt your entire life. It's going to come for your business. It's going to come for your job. This technology is, I can't overstate how massively disruptive this technology is going to be. It's going to change the way the whole world does business.
Do you think that this message can be diluted because some people will see genuine messaging, and you're absolutely correct, but they'll go, this is a marketer trying to use this for email sign-up, so they're using this as part of lead generation. Maybe they're catastrophizing the outcome that's really happening. How can we say to those people, no, this is truly genuine?
Well, if I was going to be marketing stuff, I'd tell you about my lead generation software. I'd tell you about my book platform that's great. I've got all sorts of really cool stuff that I could sell you without having to tell you that the whole world's going to come crashing down. I'm not sure that a great marketing pitch is your life is going to be completely disrupted by this technology. You're kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel for marketing copy. But you asked me about AI. That's my genuine belief about AI. I think it's going to be societal changing. And feel free to take a look at, here's the interesting thing. In Africa, elephants can sense storms coming and tsunamis coming really early, and they start moving. And they're big, these big animals, and they pick up on it and they move fast. And all the little animals, they go, oh, that's interesting. The elephants are like on the move. What we're seeing in the economy right now is the elephants are on the move, like Google and Meta and the biggest companies in the world with the smartest people that ignore most things. They're all freaking out and acting like startups. They're actually basically saying, we're going to spend $1 billion trying to hire a couple of people. We're going to upend our business model around this. We're going to completely transform. These are businesses that don't really need to change if they don't want to. They're the most profitable and most successful, most defensible businesses in the world. And they're disrupting themselves right now. They're sitting there going, this thing's too big. And if we don't get on top of this as a massive company, we're going to lose to this.
You can see there's some people online that think there's an overhype, or they think that, we're going to be fine, or we're going to keep staff. We're not going to change our ways. We've seen an evolution over the years that if anyone expects the environment to change for them, they'll die out. You have to adapt to the environment. Is it generational? Is it naivety? Is there some virtue to it? These people that are going to be reluctant to change to AI, is it going to be as simple as saying they will just not be able to survive?
The reason people don't adapt to this is because our human brains are not really built for exponential growth. We don't understand exponential growth. So there's this thing called the lily pad example, and it basically says there's lily pads on a pond, and every day they double, and then eventually they take over the entire pond and cover the entire pond. And you ask people, at what point will the pond be halfway covered? And the answer is on day 29, right? It's off day 30, right? So it's doubling every day. So right up until day 28, it's only a quarter of the pond covered. Day 27, it's 1/8 of the pond covered. So it doesn't really look like a major problem until such time as you get to day 27, 26, 28. So it's only in those last few days where the exponential growth goes whoosh. So the human brain just kind of intuitively thinks in a very linear way. And we see stuff kind of like creeping up and we go, oh yeah, it's just creeping up. It's just hit, a little bit of thing. But what happens with these technologies is kind of S-curves happen. For the first, 5 to 10 years, it's kind of a little bit disruptive. It's a little bit of a toy. People are talking about it as a new technology. And then it jumps the chasm and it becomes embedded in everything. And it just goes, changes the way we live and work. I remember this very, very clearly with all the social media technologies. I remember people saying, it's just for kids, it's a teenager thing, it's ridiculous. Even when Obama won the election in 2008 using social media, even then, 90% of business owners were like, well, I'm not going to put anything on social media. Why would I put anything on YouTube? Or why would I set up a business account? Or why would I use a personal brand to talk about my business? That's all nonsense. And it was completely nonsense until such time as it wasn't. And suddenly it was all over everything. And suddenly you see all of the most recent billionaires, many of the most recent billionaires are people who literally just built a big Instagram account and then launched a product. So Hailey Bieber, she gets a big Instagram account, she launches a makeup range of 10 products, and she's a billionaire. So you start seeing these crazy examples happening. So definitely the pattern is that for the first 5 years, it's kind of a toy, you ignore it, and then it becomes more serious, and then it becomes really serious, as you get further on. So I think we probably got till 2027, which is 5 years after ChatGPT, for this to still be a toy that you can mess around with and somewhat ignore. And then from 2027 to the early 2030s, this is going to just be the haves and the have-nots. This is you're either using it effectively or you're just totally disrupted by it. And then, call it 2032 to 2030, 5 years after that, 2037, then you're in a position where it's like, okay, this is now, you're just out of business if you didn't evolve with this.
It's interesting. I see online the kind of landscape of people using ChatGPT. And I've said up until this point, I feel like it's your intern who's on maybe 25, 30K. You delegate simple tasks like, oh, can you do this maths for me? Can you find out a good steak restaurant in, Fulham or whatever it is? But the level that this employee is going to be is only going to climb over years. But I do see some people potentially using it wrong, I would say. For instance, we've seen posts on LinkedIn that's very clearly used with ChatGPT. There's the double hyphens. We see people potentially, I even see comments on LinkedIn where I'm 100% sure someone's taken your post and said, give me a good response that I could put on this.
Well, LinkedIn does it automatically. So the LinkedIn suggests what you might say as the comment, and it just fills it full of just slop, AI generated.
Feels good though, coming from an Instagram background where people are commenting on my hairline or saying that I went to private school. This is quite refreshing.
It is, isn't it? It's like, what a wonderful post. You have really covered all the key points.
So I feel like even job pitches, and I employed someone recently, and he was actually to help me on my LinkedIn. He's £5,000 a month. And the first thing he sent me, I could tell had been put through ChatGPT. I called him a little bit. I said, how much of this has been through ChatGPT? Because this is the thing where I feel there's actually a white space on social media at the moment where, although absolutely we should be using AI, if you can write something that's genuine, maybe even that has a grammar mistake in it, not too bad of a grammar mistake, but something that actually looks human, I feel that can cut through a little bit more.
Think about a bakery, and that what we've automated is the creation of sponge. So every cake needs to be full of sponge, and that sponge is a very important part of a cake, but sponge on its own doesn't sell. If you opened a bakery and you said, I've just got sponge, there's no icing on it, there's no flavors through it, it's just sponge. You wouldn't sell very much of that. It's too generic, too plain, too bland. There's nothing special about it. Where we are right now with AI is the AI produces a ton of sponge, and then you come along and ice it properly. And if you think about what is the most human thing about a birthday cake, it's the icing, it's the name, and it's also getting some friends around and singing happy birthday to someone and presenting it at the right moment and getting them to blow out their candles and feel special. So if we think about where should your attention be as a marketer, as an entrepreneur, your attention should be on the most human part of what you do, the very, very humanizing part of it. So AI says, okay, you don't have to spend hours and hours creating sponge cake anymore. We've done that. You just need to ice it and present it. And it's like, okay, cool. So I still have a job to do, but my job has shifted a little bit. And that's a good way to think about it at the moment. It is getting smarter and smarter and better as well. So it won't be a static strategy. It'll be an evolving strategy.
What I've started to do recently, which any creators listening might take this on board, when looking at outlier videos, whenever we want to make a video on YouTube, you are an idiot if you don't look at the best performing videos before. Same if you're going into business. Even with Neutonic, we look at all of our competitors. What are they doing? What are they doing well? What potentially could they do better? Now, watching all of those videos can be quite time consuming. So a lot of YouTubers now go into the transcript, copy the transcript into ChatGPT. What's the general sentiment?
Yep.
Recently, I saw an outlier from another creator, and I said, right, okay, if I'm going to copy his packaging, I'm not going to watch any of his video. And instead of going through his transcript, I actually copied all of his comments, which there were 1,200. And I said, what is the general sentiment of this video? And it said the people that watch this video are incredibly happy that the creator was helping them achieve financial freedom, not to be rich, but to help support their families. So I made that the first thing I said in my video. Hey guys, the advice I'm about to give you isn't about getting rich. It's about helping provide and supporting your families. That is my highest generating revenue video I've ever put on YouTube.
Yeah.
Now that saved me hours. It saved me going through the comments. It saved me having to get too caught up on everything. That is a hack then that I just bolted onto my own creative. That's about as far as I would say I'm using AI. So I'm kind of feeling that maybe I'm a little bit behind when it comes to a lot of other arduous tasks.
There's a few ways to think about AI. So here's a list of things that I think are good, and I love what you just said. That's awesome. But here's a few things to think about, or what we're thinking about in our company. So part number one is we love saying our business is dead. We need to reinvent the business. So one of the frames that I've got with my teams, earlier this year we took the whole teams away on different team retreats because I have a couple of different companies. And what we did is we started with our business is already dead and we need to reinvent it. So we play the game and we say, how did the business die? And the business died because another company had way faster speed to value. They could actually deliver what the customer wanted really fast because they were using AI. And also they were better at telling their story because they were using AI. And then we asked the question, well, how were they doing that? And they might have come up with something like what you just said. And then we said, okay, we've got to become that company that disrupted us and killed our business that we have today. That's what our job is, to become that company. In 2020, the Prime Minister came on TV and said, we're going into lockdown. No one's allowed to do business the way you were doing business yesterday. You're all locked down. You have to stay in your homes. That was a moment where every business owner, every entrepreneur said, holy smokes, I need to make my business digital or else who knows whether I'll even be in business 6 months from now. And I wish there was a moment that each entrepreneur could say, this is that moment, like this is the time, like the lockdown moment for AI. It's like you either get with the program now or every day that you wait is going to be a day of catch up that you have to do. So that's idea number one. Your business is dead, and then how are you going to reinvent it? Idea number two that I like is what I call Atlantis has risen. And that is basically if we discovered a new continent called Atlantis, and on Atlantis, there's 1 billion people, they all have a master's or a PhD degree, they're super smart, but they just don't know a lot about like what you want them to do. They're all willing to work for free. And we call these agents. And basically, if you could access unlimited free labor, these remote workers, what would you do? So for example, I know this is a crazy example, but let's take Neutonic. And we said, if we genuinely had unlimited free labor with PhDs, what if every single person who drank a can of Neutonic could get like health and focus and wellness advice tailored to them, and they just scan a QR code and there's PhD level advice and understanding. They fill in a quiz, they answer a series of questions. It then tells them exactly like what should be going on and how to improve their life and their focus and solve problems. It's like we can assign someone who's got a PhD to each individual can drinker just by having an AI agent assigned to that particular individual. We could get that AI agent to go do unique research into their situation and custom build a plan to improve their focus just with one QR code and a little quiz. So you might say, if I had unlimited labor, I'm going to give everyone that if they want it. And then you go, oh, okay, well, that's pretty wild to think like that. But it's totally possible, right? You just send it over to Atlantis.
We now feel that maybe we're not utilizing the QR code, right? And instead, it's completely right what you're saying. You're like, you've got a product, it helps people do X, Y, Z. However, if that agent was to then audit their sleep, maybe even connect with their Whoop or their 8 Sleep or whatever it is, it could then say, okay, cool, you're getting X amount of productivity, but we've spotted that you've got irregular bedtimes between Monday and Thursday. Are there some changes or compromises you could have there? Then it might go, please tell us what times at the office you drink coffee. Then it goes, okay, we're starting to see a few coffees after 4 p.m. And like you say, this would be labor through AI, which would be very cost effective, a lot cheaper than hiring labor. And it could then say, for next week, we're not going to get you to drink more Neutonic. We're not going to get you more to spend with us. What we're going to do is actually get you to bulk up your productivity from other areas in your life. And then the gratitude from those consumers would actually make them more inclined to promote your product, more inclined to share a can with someone else. This drink that I have didn't just help me, it helped create sustainable habits. I know someone behind the camera is going to have a notepad out right now, writing these down, going, let's implement this before this episode goes live.
Yeah. So that is, So that's definitely something that everyone should think about. Like, what would I do if I had free labor? The other one that I think is really important is this concept that I'm working on called loops and groups. Loops and groups is that every single business is now going to go through very, very fast value creation loops, and you're going to have groups that spin up together to work on a business. I think in the future we're going to have a lot of people who work plural careers where they've got 6 or 7 different projects on the go. So you might have this podcast that you're doing, which is your podcast, and you've got a team of people you're doing that with. But then you've got this project that you're doing with Chris, and that's a different group, and it's at a different stage in its value creation cycle. You might have another thing that you're involved in that's completely different. Maybe it's a tour of live events or something like that, and that might be a different group and a different stage of value creation. So I think it's, and here's the other thing. The people that you're doing this with, like Chris, he might have his projects that he's doing as well. And in the future, in an AI-enabled world, it's going to be far more acceptable for people to have 5 or 6 different projects on the go. But the way you can mentally manage that is you need to know for every project that you've got, where are you in the loop and where are you in the group? So the loop, and I'll run through like what I consider to be a value creation loop. So a value creation loop is identify an opportunity that's a good fit for you, and then minimum viable product, test it, like very cheap and fast testing to see if it's a good idea or not. Product market fit, so see if the product can be sold and see if you can make it and sell it. Go to market, sell more of it. Scale up, sell it in more places and more locations to more markets, and then exit, sell the company. So there's kind of like this value creation loop that's there. And like this one is definitely now at product market fit. So you've found a product that you can sell, and now you're in like scale up. You're like you've gone to market, you've made some sales, and now it's like, let's sell it in more locations, more places, and all that sort of stuff. So this project is in the scale-up phase, whereas this podcast is in the early stages, right? So it's like you've found founder opportunity fit, you've done some minimum testing, you know that it's a good idea, right? So you're in a different session. Then you've got your groups, and your groups are a 2-person scout team who are working together to scout an opportunity, a 4-person fire-starting team who are getting something going, an 8-person core team who are maintaining 7-figure revenue. It's kind of like the go-to-market pre-scale up, and then a 30-person scale-up and exit team. So it's 2, 4, 8, 30. And pretty much every business now is 2, 4, 8, 30. And with 30 people, you can do an enormous amount. You can do what 300 people used to do now that AI is here. So if you think about every startup is either in the 2, 4, 8, 30 phase, or it's somewhere in that loop. And if you know where you are in those 2 things, then it's like, oh, I can play full out while I'm working on this project, and I can also have other things on the go.
In other news, this podcast is brought to you by Neutonic. Look, we don't have any fancy sponsors to this podcast, so thank you to all of you that drink Neutonic. It helps keep this podcast going. If you haven't tried it, bloody suggest that you do. It's really good. It's like an energy drink, but much better. Although the marketing department say I'm not really allowed to say that. And if you're not into caffeine, we have pills and powders that taste amazing and work really well. I could go on about all the benefits, but why don't we just go back to the podcast episode? That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Head to Neutonic.com. Bye-bye. Another thing here is how lifestyles have changed, and where predominantly back in the day, let's say, the man would take the majority of the burden of the work, the woman would take the majority of the burden on the family. But even the pandemic and working from home freed up hours of commuting time, so that suddenly that responsibility can shift a bit more, which I'd never really considered. But also the use of AI, the fact people commute less, the fact people are more digitally connected than ever, is freeing up so much, potentially wasn't wasted time. You might have read a paper on the way to work. But like you say there, to be able to juggle several things at the same time, where your assistant can remain involved in all of those.
Yep.
You might have the same communication groups within all of those. And those loops, I assume, can become easier and easier connected. And all of them can then understand the founder's vision, the founder's ethics, the founder's morals.
Yep.
Something can come through and they'll go, he's going to hate that. Or something comes through, because this will be right up his street. And what I found recently is having all of those things connected and intertwined just makes life a lot easier, because there are so many synergists between them. The one area that I'm excited for, and we could already be there yet, is the biggest weakness of my brand is probably my own personal admin, where depending on my energy, my mood, do I want to look at emails? Do I want to plan out my next week? Do I want to have to move things around in the calendar? Sometimes I'd rather just not look. You know, when you've had a big day, you don't want to have a look. I'm kind of waiting for an AI agent, which I don't think we're far away, that encompasses everything. And a phone call might get booked in and the AI agent goes, he doesn't usually like doing calls after 4 p.m. And they can have soft approaches, come back and forth, or there can be emails that come in that get automatic responses. I know that we're getting very, very close to that.
Very close to that, yeah.
But when that rolls out and you can have one that you could put more trust in than a human, that's only going to add like another layer of what we've seen since commuting's diminished or whatever, that people are going to free up, even just if an hour or two a day of that personal admin. That means you can bring another loop in.
One of the things that I'm prototyping at the moment is, and we're not sure if we'll take this to market or not, but it's called entity.ai. And basically, we want to turn your business into an actual entity that you can talk to, the whole business. So your business is a legal entity as it currently stands. But if we plug into one central AI unit, all the finances, all the calendars, all the Slack messages, all the emails, right? If we're putting all of that into one entity, and then you have a conversation with your business. So you say, hey, Neutonic, how many cans did we sell yesterday?
Not enough.
Not enough. Keep going, right? And you say, Neutonic, which is our most popular flavor? And Neutonic, what are the comments saying on our recent YouTube videos? So you're just talking to just Neutonic. Neutonic is the business, and it talks back to you, and it has a conversation with you, and it understands the full context that no human could understand previously. So previously, you needed an executive team with 5 people on it in order to, you talk to your head of marketing for marketing-related stuff and head of finance for finance stuff. But AI is going to just centralize that, and you will actually just talk to your business, and your business will actually be an entity on its own. In the same way that in sci-fi, they talk to the ship. You know, they're flying through space and they're talking to the actual ship, and they're saying, what's happening with this and what's happening with that? And there's just one entity that is the ship, and you just talk to it and it knows everything about what's going on. So, we're going to have that with business pretty soon, right? Even me with a very, relatively limited team and size relative to much bigger companies, we're prototyping some pretty successful stuff with that as it stands.
So then this could also prevent maybe a bit of infighting where marketing are saying, oh, sales aren't doing the job, and sales go, where's our marketing leads? Finance are saying you're both spending too much. Everyone's kind of just covering their own back through preservation of their own role. Where if you just had that single entity, you could just say, where are we at?
Yeah.
And it would be unbiased.
And the team would sit around and we would all talk and take orders from the entity, and we'd give ideas to the entity, and it would give us feedback, and we'd be collaborating with our own business. So the business would be an entity that we talk to, and we just collaborate with it.
I'm definitely becoming AI pilled at the moment. And last night, sitting at the table, my mum says to me, oh, it's amazing. Your second cousins just got into a good university. And for the first time ever, I sat back and I thought, if they're going for a social life, to get pissed a little bit and mingle with other people, or like me, do your laundry for the first time, that's great. However, when you look at the landscape of where we're at and where we're going to be in 3 years' time, and the amount of debt that university accrues for a lot of people, I was actually in AI last night going, okay, let's say it's £60,000, £60,000. This could all too easily be a down payment on a house where I think they pay 3% interest, which isn't a huge difference to where we're at with mortgage rates. So there's part of me now saying, maybe we could have taken the money that they were going to spend or the debt they were going to get in uni, 18 years old, put a down payment on a house. They could then potentially just learn or grow up or have some kind of... The
best thing they could do is become an apprentice to an entrepreneur.
This is exactly the point that I was thinking. And
join a startup,
accrue wealth within your own, let's say, property, although we could argue whether or not that truly is thing to do. But 3 years' time to have a diploma in something that is really reciting information and being able to remember it for a test. And that's not me shitting on qualifications. I mean, I want doctors to go do their qualifications.
Course, yeah.
And again, I don't think they should be paying for that. If we need doctors and nurses so bad, we should have incentive structures in there. But for people now potentially wanting to be entrepreneurs, everyone I bump into in Clapham, they're like, oh, James, I've got my own business. Oh, how old are you? I'm 20. You don't want to know what I was getting up to at 20 or what I was prioritizing at 20. And everyone's starting business so much younger, being so entrepreneurial. Where are we at with people going to university? Should they be going? Should they not be going? Where are you at with your...
Yeah, unless you really, really, really want to be a vet or something that needs a qualification. But even still, like, you got to really do some deep diving of like a lot of the things that currently make money will not make money in 5 to 10 years. If you're in audit with KPMG and you're currently on 500 grand a year, you're not going to be on 500 grand a year in a few years' time. There's going to be tiny little firms that can do AI-driven audits and they'll be perfectly fine, or it'll just be completely automated into the system, and we'll scratch our heads thinking that there was once upon a time this job called audit. Even in the medical world, you say, oh, well, you have to be licensed to do certain things. Yeah, there will be a person who is licensed, but the AI will literally be doing like 90% of the work, and then the human will sign it off. So there'll be, like, for example, on medical imaging, the AI is already like finding stuff that humans just can't find. And, someone who is looking at medical images, they might look at it for 8 minutes and the AI looks at it for, 1/8 of a second and finds the thing. And then it shows it to the human and circles it and says, that's the problem. And the human goes, yep, you're right. Okay, next. So there's just not going to be as many people required in that space. There's a real distinction between directors and doers. So a director is someone who is directing the work. They're coming up with the idea, and the doer is the person who's doing the work. AI is really good at the middle to the middle, but not the start to the end. So you think about a founder starts something with an idea and they say, I take accountability for getting this into the world. And then the exit, it's time to exit, it's time to sell it, it's time to package this up and get out of it, right? So that's the start and the end. AI is really good on all things, provided someone human says, I'm going to initiate a prompt or I'm going to initiate some sort of activity. AI then goes, oh, I know what you want me to do. So I'll do all that. And then the human says, cool, here's what I want to do next, right? So start and the end. So normally in a business, you would call that person the director. The director is the person who comes up with the idea. Okay, we're going to do this plan. We're going to get this. We're going to get these experts to come in and do this. We're going to get these employees to come in and do this. That's the role of the director. And then the doers are the people who come in and do the work. Another way of thinking about this would be the conductor versus the musicians. We all need to now learn how to be more of a director or a conductor as opposed to a doer or a musician, because it's now the people who are directing the work who are good at that are going to be able to do a lot more. And what's cool about these 20-year-olds is they kind of get it. They're like, oh yeah, because they've grown up with it and they're starting to sort of like, it's in the fiber of their bones. And they're saying, oh, I just need to come up with ideas and then get AI agents to help me to execute those ideas. So I need to be the initiator and the completer, but there's that middle part that can just be done for me, which used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get someone to do that. And I can just do that for $10 or less. The world, let's zoom right out. The economy 250 years ago was a land-based economy, and we had the feudal system and we had the colonial system. Those were our two political systems, and it was about land ownership. On your own land in Western Europe, it was the feudal system, which was kings and lords, and then on other people's lands, it was colonial system, which is colonizing other people's land. And that was when the economy was based very much on land, those were the two systems that emerged. And we had mostly serfs and peasants, and then the elite kings, queens, and all of that sort of stuff. And that was like thousands of years. And then a technological change, it was technology that came along, and technology came and shifted things into the industrial age. And the land-based economy went around the 1750s. It started dropping away. And all those people who owned land, it wasn't so important anymore. And the industrial economy started to accelerate up. And in the early 1800s, in the UK especially, we had the early industrialization, where it didn't matter if you owned lots of land, it mattered that you owned a factory. And that you could basically, this was labor and capital. So you now needed lots of labor and lots of capital being machinery and factories and all that sort of stuff. And basically a new economy was born. And you would basically say there's an old economy, which was this, and then there's the industrialized economy. Alongside that industrialized economy, we built schools, we changed the nature of universities and education. We built something called wages. Now, wages never existed prior to the industrial age. The idea that you would do an average day's work, an average month, and get an average amount of pay, and that everyone got paid the same, and pretty much everyone was roughly paid the same. That's a very, very new idea. That kind of popped up in the 1850s. Prior to that, people got paid for tasks. They got paid to produce something. They got paid to deliver something or do something. But everything was outcome-based, delivery-based, right? Very, 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 very few people just got fixed wages prior to the 1850s. So we created factories and offices, and we created all these systems that are perfectly aligned to factories and offices. But that system has come crashing down at the late 1900s, early 2000s. And then the digital system's been taking off. So if we were to zoom right out, on the long history of humanity, we would see the rise and fall of the agricultural age, right? The land-based economy, the rise and fall of the industrial age, the labor and capital economy, and then the rise of the digital age, which is the enterprise economy. So classical economists, they say the four things that give you a moat is land, labor, capital, enterprise. So land, labor and capital, and we fought wars over socialism, capitalism, and then enterprise, entrepreneurialism. And so we're now moving into the entrepreneurialism economy, which is underpinned by all the digital stuff. And so much of our lives that we just take for granted right now, we don't realize it, but that was all built to go with the hand in hand with the industrial age. And now that's coming to an end. Everything's going to change as we enter this new age.
And I suppose whichever one of those stages we could go to, as one age is closing down for another one to start, they probably thought this is the end of the world. This is the machines come along in the industrial age and they go, that's it. Humans are going to be out on the streets, nothing to do.
They did think that.
And then nowadays, I think there's a similar kind of thought process that if we're replaced is the term, and I'm trying to explain to my parents last night, I say trying, I think the generational gap is very difficult for them to understand. And I was trying to say to my dad, I think that he worked in logistics his whole life. I thought truck drivers, I can imagine, will be some of the first to go because of other things like night shifts, long periods of driving, accidents, falling asleep at the wheel. Not to mention, I think that for humanity, just diminishing the amount of people that need to be awake at night would be a great thing. Then I was trying to explain that maybe my dad thinks 50 years. I said, maybe in 10 years, we're going to start looking at people driving their own cars as being a stupid thing. Traffic algorithms, safety, prevalence of drink driving incidents, whatever. The amount of people that make a living from driving people, we're going to soon look back and go, that's crazy. Can you remember back in the day when you used to have to drive somewhere? And we suddenly think that these people are just going to be left on a universal credit system or they're going to be sponging on the state. But really what you're saying is we're going to go from, let's say, crude numbers, 1,000 companies with 1,000 members of staff to maybe 100,000 companies with a very lean 10-man team. And each one of those is going to be responsible for AI agents. And that person who could have traditionally grown up to being a black cab driver or a truck driver is now actually going to find their way to utilize their skills in a completely different realm. It mostly being online, digital, and the utilization of AI. People aren't going to be displaced. They're going to be working in different avenues.
And they're going to be working in very, very different ways. So there was a particular way of working on the land. So there's a lot of similarities between AI and farming. So in farming, you plant a seed and you sit back and wait and God does the work. And basically out comes wheat and you just don't know how the hell that happens. And you're sitting there looking at it and go, I just prompted the soil and then out came the wheat and I just waited and then the value creation was all done automatically. So we had widespread automation during farming that essentially artificial intelligence, what we call God force, was creating all the value. And our job was just to prompt the soil and harvest the results. So we did the start and the end, right? So the planting and the harvesting, but all the middle bit was automated through a technology called soil. And that was that whole system, and it gave rise to a particular way of working and living. When we go over here, we're going to have the same sort of thing. We're going to plant and harvest. We're going to prompt the digital soil and harvest the digital fruit off the back of it. We're going to have very, very different ways of working. So in the short term, there's going to be a lot of disruption. And I'll give you exactly what's going to happen. In a current house in the UK, if you were to take all the homes, let's say in the UK, there's money entering those homes, right? So every month there's money coming into those homes. As it currently stands, 60% of the money going into UK homes comes from wages. That's a fixed amount of money for a fixed average amount of time. And it doesn't matter whether you have a good month or a bad month, you get the same. And you kind of go from junior to senior over the course of decades, and the money just kind of slightly changes. So that wages, as we know, it represents 60%. Then there's 15% of money entering homes as government benefits. 15% of money entering homes is what you'd call performance money. Performance money is sales, entrepreneurship, profits from businesses that you run. So it's like you're essentially doing stuff and getting outcomes, and that drives the money. And then there's 10%, which is coming from assets that yield. So you own houses and they pay rent, or you own shares and they pay you a dividend. So that's how the pie looks currently. I think what will happen is wages will drop from 60% to 30%. So I think wages are going to go away. I don't think they're going to go completely away, and it's not going to happen overnight, but they definitely, over 5 to 10 years, wages are going to start dropping precipitously. The number of people who can say they've got a good wage that pays the bills. And that's going to split. 15% of those people, or sorry, half the people who are displaced are going to need government benefits. They're going to say, okay, I don't know how to handle this, so just pay me money. I'll go on to basic universal credit or whatever. And then the other half go, oh, wait a second, this entrepreneurship thing, I can actually do groups and loops, and I can start stuff, and I can have plural projects on the go. So I'll go up to the performance zone, and I'm going to build digital assets that are high performance digital assets, and I can have podcasts and videos and social media accounts. We can write a book, and we can launch a can of drink, and right, it's all going on up here. The government is going to freak out not knowing how to pay for all the people who drop down onto universal basic income and credit and all that sort of stuff and benefits. So they're going to go and attack those who own traditional assets, try to steal all that through wealth taxes. And those wealth taxes are going to go towards paying for this short-term transition. And then all the people up here who are performance assets, they're going to realize that they can do that from anywhere in the world, and that as the governments become grabby, they're going to move to low-tax environments like Dubai and Miami, or Switzerland or Singapore, or these Bahrain. They're going to go and find places or pockets around the world that cater to these high-performance digital asset providers. So straight away, we're going to see this disruption as these groups move around. Some leave the country, some stay, they restructure overseas. These people who had good jobs, they go down here to benefits. These people who had traditional assets in their pension, they get pillaged, right? So all that's going to happen in the next sort of 10 years.
I hope you're enjoying the episode. You might have noticed Daniel just there spoke about high net worth individuals packing up and leaving the countries they're in. It's estimated that almost 140,000 people will relocate from high tax countries to others with more favourable conditions. And that may not sound like such a bad thing, but in the United Kingdom, for example, where the top 29% of taxes are paid for by the top 1% of earners, this is a considerable problem. Other countries losing millionaires are China and South Africa, and where are they going? Well, the majority of them are heading to the UAE, where they can earn the same, if not better, and pay a fraction of the amount of tax that they're currently paying. And another big chunk of them are heading over to the United States. It's not just bad that these countries are losing taxpayers, but they're losing talent too. Anyway, I thought I'd drop by and just put that into context. We'll get back to the episode. I've got work to do. Out of the latter stuff there can seem a little bit uncomfortable for people, but actually what I've not thought about there, what you said about wages halving, to me that excites me probably on the basis of productivity. Now, I can't speak of everyone on a wage, but I've been employed before, and the model kind of sucked. I didn't realize I was entrepreneurial until I escaped the wage profession, and it was as a personal trainer. And I thought, hold on, if I can build more demand, I can charge more money, I could do less sessions for more. Suddenly, this mind just exploded. But previous to that, I worked in IT sales, and I was selling a product, and I had a wage, and I had a fixed commission. And I hit my commission within about 4 months, and that wasn't even something impressive. It was just a small capped commission. I said to my manager, so I don't need to make any more sales for the year. She said to me, you just need to make your phone targets every day. I had to make 100 phone calls a day. And I said to her, but there's no incentive structure here for me. So I said to her openly, I'm just calling Cornwall County Council and it was press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this. And I would let it sit on hold and go over and over for an hour and 15. Then the last hour of the day, I would just smash the same number and put it down after 10 seconds. And my average call time was probably 45 seconds. So my manager would say to me, James, great call stats. You're averaging great averages. But I would say to her, I was like, Rachel, I'm literally sat at my desk doing nothing. If you could just get me a little bit more commission, I will work. And she goes, I can't. That's, covered. We've got this UK and Ireland sales department. There's nothing else I can do.
You discovered the core problem with socialism very young.
And I was like, yeah, there's nothing else for me to do there. Then previous to that, again, in employment, wherever you give someone a wage, you're saying, I want the most amount of your energy for the least amount of money. And the employer is saying, well, I'm going to do the least amount I can without getting fired.
Yeah.
And if there's a performance benefit, they're going to go, I'm going to get to that very point and stop.
And that's it.
And not only do I think that's bad for employers, not only do I think that's bad for anyone, and even the people I contract now, I like to incentivize them.
Yeah.
Maybe we're having a month. I go, hey, do you want 50% of the YouTube rev? We might get a better edit. I always love to give people these incentive structures. And what I think could be good is when that 60% comes to 30%, 30% of people on wages will realize they have several more gears that have been diminished by being employed.
Massively. Yeah. Well, the whole employment model of wages was essentially industrialists who had factories and offices. And they basically, the factory does most of the work. The office, what's called the capital in economic terms does most of the work. And you need people to work the capital. But ultimately, anyone can drive the tractor. Anyone can like pull the lever down and get the thing to stamp its thing. And like, so it doesn't matter if you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger or Danny DeVito, they can each do the thing. So in the factory and office environment, it's very common for Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Michael Jordan to all be sitting next to each other, roughly speaking, producing the same output, right? But when you take the constraints away and you say, we don't do factories and offices anymore, you go and eat what you kill. And suddenly Michael Jordan goes, oh, wait a second, I'm pretty good at this whole basketball thing. And Danny DeVito says, I'm pretty good at this comedy thing. And Arnie says, I'm pretty good at this bodybuilding thing. And then they go off and they each go explode in different ways and they find things that they're high performers at. So the issue with factories and offices is it was deliberately created to create an averaged out Homer Simpson kind of environment and nothing more. Now, by the way, this is going to work for some people and not work for other people. So there's two what's called distribution curves. One's called a bell curve and one's called a power law. A bell curve is where all the results cluster around the middle. That means everyone earns roughly the same. Everyone does the middle. Digital environments create power laws, which means all the results go to the top 10%. So most online shopping goes to Amazon. Most online search goes to Google. Most hot people get all the dates on Tinder. So it's power laws and these power law distributions. So it's extremely good for anyone who can find themselves at the top of a power law, and it's very bad for people who want to just be average. And unfortunately, for the last 250 years, we've built a society based for, everyone's just going to get about the same, but about average. And we also, that sounds like a good thing, but it's also incredibly punishing on anyone who's extraordinary, right? I mean, how many Einsteins did we have just picking wheat in crops? How many Cindy Crawfords were like just working in factories and like getting paid normal money? So if you are actually extraordinary at something, this is soul crushing. But if you actually are Homer Simpson, then it's like, oh, thank goodness, this just looks after the average person. So the pendulum is swinging from favoring the average to favoring the extraordinary.
I think George Mack said that the Britain's funniest person's probably working in a factory somewhere. Mm-hmm. And if it was in America, he'd be somewhere else. Now, talking about that kind of power curve, we probably should move on to the fact that a lot of people, maybe not everyone, can move up this quite substantially if they build a personal brand.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I would argue at the moment where a lot of people might get to this period in time and go, I've lost my job, I've been displaced. They could be just several years away of repetitive work from becoming an overnight success. Talk to me about what's essential for a personal brand in the modern era.
Okay. So we used to define businesses by the location and the product that they sold. So place and product. That was how we defined businesses. We now look at intellectual property, which is your story that you've lived and what you've learned from that story, and what we call an ICP, an ideal customer persona. So the first thing that you have to do if you want to build a personal brand is say, what's my intellectual property? Like, what do I know? What's my story? What did I learn along the way? And who's my story relevant to? Like, what's my ideal customer persona? Like, who would be my audience? Who would be the type of person who gains the most value from what I know? So let's say part of your story is that you had a really challenging time in your marriage and that you got through it and you created your own 5 steps for improving your marriage. And then you say, oh, that's going to be really valuable for wealthy couples who don't want to get a divorce and they've got kids and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to marry up this ideal customer persona with this intellectual property. And then we want to take that to market. We want to tell people that this exists, that there is this marriage of IP and ICP. So the way you could do that is you could try and introduce that through a business brand. And you could say, oh, look, this is our new company called Smith & Co. that does this. Problem is that the data reveals that on social media, personal brands are 20 times more powerful than business brands. So whereas you would previously say, here's a product, here's a place, and here's a business, and that worked really well for a couple of hundred years, you now say, here's my ideal customer persona, here's my intellectual property, and here's the person who talks about it. And if you get those three things right, if you get that combination right, you are suddenly in the new economy and you're winning. If you can define a game that you know you can win, you suddenly go to the top of the power law. So I'll give you an example. If someone says, I'm a financial planner, that is such a broad general game that it's incredibly hard to be in the top 10% globally. So you would basically have to somehow say, I'm the top, I've written a New York Times bestselling book and I've been on all the top podcasts and I've got all the top brands and all that recommending me. Like to be at the top of a financial planner would be very, very hard. But if you said, I'm a financial planner and I specialize in rural families that own farms that want to do financial planning for 2 generations forward to make sure that their family farm is in the family 2 generations from now. Now you've defined a game and that game is your game. You made up the rules to that game. Suddenly by creating a defined game, you're at the top of your defined game. So for example, Red Bull came up with a game called we're not just a soda drink or we're not just a Coca-Cola competitor, we're an energy drink, right? So we're going to be the first one to come up with a new game called energy drinks. And everyone was like, what's an energy drink? Oh, it's a drink that you drink for the energy. It doesn't even matter if it doesn't taste nice. It's you have it for the energy. You guys have created a new category and you said we're a focus drink. So we're a drink that you drink if you want to focus on something. And people are, I've never heard of a focus drink before. What is a focus drink? Well, we're the number one at that, right? Now, we're not number one at being Coca-Cola and we're not number one at being Red Bull. We're number one at being a drink for people who want to focus on work and get stuff done. Oh, okay, that's really cool. So as long as you define your game as we've created our own rules, we've got our story, our intellectual property, we've got our ideal customer persona who wants that, and we've got personal brands who embody that, now you're completely winning. And it's not surprising that your business is now worth tens of millions of dollars in its infancy because you got those few things right.
We looked at quadrants of that, and funnily enough, Chris will kill me for saying this, we looked at a quadrant of a productivity drink market, and there are a few players in there, but we identified that they didn't have strong personal brands leading them. They were trying to go company first. Now, another place that I've seen this in the fitness industry, I was guilty of it, and I love that you use fitness trainers and examples in your books. It's so easy for myself when I started. I thought I need to be a business. So my brand was JS Training. And it wasn't an image of me. It was like some generic icon.
JS Training, did it have a location?
No, it was I just thought I had to hide behind a business.
Yeah, but were you basically...
Oh yeah, I was in a gym in Bracknell.
Yeah, so JS Training in Bracknell, right? So that's the old model, which is a place and a product or service with a business name attached. Yeah, so doing everything wrong or doing everything right for a different time.
Yeah, and back then I kind of thought, people will respect me as a part of the business, although I'm the only person in it. And it was only through navigating, and I kind of, even if I was to look at Joe Wicks, I go, well, he is the body coach, but he's actually Joe Wicks, and actually body coach is the business. And I kind of thought, do you know what? I'm going to change my name to James Smith, fat loss coach and educator, because I was then trying to be a personal brand and tell people what I did. Then I cut it down to just James Smith, and I realized, hold on, the people that I like are themselves, they're their brands. I always say that Chris Williamson isn't Modern Wisdom, he's Chris Williamson. Modern Wisdom's the business, Alex Hormozy, acquisition.com. And when we were launching the drink, it was very important to do that. But now I have a creative idea that Chris hasn't signed off yet, where I think we should come out and own the fact that we are an energy drink, but better. And I wanted to go to a dark warehouse, gagged, covered in masking tape, and I want someone to try and squeeze out of me, James, just say it's an energy drink. And I'm refusing, we're going to cut your fingers off, I'm not saying it. And then they say, we're going to look through your ChatGPT. And I go, okay, I'll say it. And when they pull the tape off, I say, okay, guys, it's an energy drink. And then when I say with nootropics, they gag me again, say, shut the hell up. Because we've got a suite of other products, I thought...
You get to live out your fantasies with this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then I was thinking, because we're going into retail, maybe it would be less confusing for people to see it as an energy drink plus other things than potentially be in a productivity drink, maybe put into a health aisle or navigating that for our consumers. But it's been so good to establish ourselves in that quadrant. And I'm now thinking, could we tiptoe via creatives into other ways? But like you say, then you do compete with the other big dogs.
The name Neutonic or Modern Wisdom or acquisition.com, we lead in with the personal brand and that gets people's attention, that people now know you exist. And then the buyers of the product, the buyers of the from the company, they want to feel like they're part of a community. One of the moats that is going to survive AI is the community moat. So if you feel like you're part of a group of people who are all focused and productivity focused and like living their best life, and this is part of that, then they want a name that is associated to that community. And that's where they don't necessarily want to name themselves and the products they consume after the brand, the personal brand. So, for example, we want to discover that Hailey Bieber has this new makeup range, but we don't want to buy her personal brand. We want to buy Rode, and we want to be part of the Rode community, right? So think about business brands now as almost community labels, that it's almost a community that you're part of, and the community has to have a name. So, like, for example, people buy from me, but then they buy into the Dent community. Make a dent, be brave, have fun, make a dent, stand out, scale up, make a dent in the universe, right? So, like, they want to be part of the community of entrepreneurs who are using business as a force for good. So they buy into the Dent community. And that way they don't have to say that they're part of the Daniel Priestley cult, right? So they can have a...
Sounds a bit better.
Yeah, sounds a bit better. So it's that personal brand is discovery, and then once it hits community, it's that business brand. There's 3 types of brands: personal brand, business brand, and product brand. So those are three. I would really encourage you to consider that while it's important to have a few big retailers who can fulfill the product, if you can be digital first and that it's just personal brand straight into ordering online, recurring subscriptions, you're going to have a much more valuable business. Those big retailers, they eat up an enormous amount of just wasted space and money. And it is the old way of doing business. The new way of doing business is that the product just arrives magically, and it arrives magically, and you're part of a community, and like all the money that you would have spent with these big retailers goes into building a community of people who love the product and all that sort of stuff. So as much as you can lean that way, you'll smash it.
Interesting enough, Luke, who's in the room with us, he didn't tell me I had a book deal until he'd already got the final amount of money. So if I need to FaceTime him, something very bad has happened, or there's very good news. So the second I found out I wasn't being sued, which was great, he says, "You got a book deal." And I said, okay. Didn't really think about writing a book. And because I had a digital online product at the same time, I thought, what's the point? And he says to me, a lot of people online think you're a prick. And those people are going to go into Tesco's and they're going to see that book written by that prick. And they're going to go over and say, what's that prick got to say about himself? He goes, you have the opportunity that they open it on a random page. They can look at it and go, oh.
Less of a prick.
Yeah, that actually makes a bit of sense. And then they might read a second page and go, do you know what? Maybe he's not a prick. So for the can in retail, one thing I do like is that potentially some people online are going to walk in and go, there's that drink from that prick. And they might be getting their sugar-free Red Bull the same day. They're going to go, let's see how rubbish this is, so I can slander it online and I can say, yeah, tried it, it was rubbish. And they'll sip it and go,
that's not so bad.
That's actually not so bad. So that's what excites me about retail. And I'm actually incredibly flattered that we have so many people that buy direct as it is. Or maybe in the stages of establishing a personal brand, which I did by accident being a PT. I just didn't want to walk the floor anymore. As simple as people say, why'd you build a business? I go, it's daunting to talk to a stranger who has their headphones in and is doing something in their spare time on a gym floor. Arguably, this is probably someone's only hour of the day they get to themselves. And I'm going to come over and go, can you take your headphones out? Because I want to pitch my business to you. So I was kind of pushed into the world of online personal brands. I try and say to people, tell me if you're wrong or if I'm wrong, that sometimes you should establish a personal brand first and then look into products, offerings,
if you can afford to do it, yeah. If you can afford to do it, if you can build a personal brand without having to monetize, I don't really have a preference. You can build a brand and then find a way to monetize, or you can have a way to monetize and then build a personal brand. Some people start with the business and they want to build from that. A lot of the people that I work with, they already have a business that's doing $500,000 to $5 million, and then they strap a personal brand on that and it just jumps a category. And then there are some people I work with who start with personal brand. In fact, I personally do one-to-one coaching with some very famous people and athletes and all that sort of stuff. And they're coming to the end of the athletic career and they want to pivot their personal brand into products and services that can replace their athletics income. So you can start with either. You're still going to have some basics that you get right. So you're going to have a great way of pitching yourself so that people understand you as a personal brand. And that's where you lay down the game that you're trying to win and you get people to buy into that game. So that's called pitching. You're still going to have to publish regularly. So publishing videos, publishing content, publishing books. So publishing stuff so that people can read, consume, learn more, run down the rabbit hole. You still need a product ecosystem so you can monetize. You need to raise profile by being on other people's platforms and cross-promoting. And then you need to forge joint ventures and partnerships so that you can scale. And those are the 5 things that only that personal brand can do. Those are the big 5 that you do when you're a personal brand: pitch, publish, product, profile, partnership. And if you basically move into that, it encapsulates all of it. You're going to have your products for monetizing. You're going to have your deals for distribution. You're going to have your big podcast that you go on other than your own. So all of it's going to give you guidance around what you're going to be doing.
I think for me, the advice I like to give would be the businesses that can afford to have the luxury of what I would call like an interest savings account and brand. So for myself, being a PT, it was 1 hour a day, 1 post a day. I'm earning my bread and butter here, but I'm problem solving business, Bracknell location. I'm now going to solve the same problem online every time a question asks me something. So now, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a personal trainer, whether you're a physio, whether you are a dog trainer, which again excites me as far as the online realm of creating services, products. If people can just find one video, one post, one thing to do a day, and I don't like the fact that people think it needs to be a massive production. You could even write a tweet and screenshot it, or even a carousel post, which is performing fantastically at the moment. But they need to build. And for me, the idea of my mum and dad saying to me, put some money away for when you're older, didn't excite me. But the idea of doing one post a day, that in the fact that in
putting
a couple
some
of years,
brand aside.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. The notepad's back out again for that. I want to get people excited online to do that. And the harsh thing is that online people see these startups, these founders, they explode, they get funding. But in reality, for me, it took me 3.5 years from the first post before I took an online client. It took me 10 months to be my marketing before someone ever bought. I feel that this digital landscape that we have online is making expectations potentially unrealistic. With the one person that explodes in a year and goes on Dragon's Den and gets Bartlett to invest in them.
You never know what's going to happen with the personal brand. So let's take the dog trainer and let's imagine that they're doing their dog training out in the local park in Clapham and they're doing their dog thing and they've got 30 clients who pay $30 a month or whatever and it's a little side hustle. But they just do that one extra step, pull out the phone and do a little Facebook Live or Instagram Live, and they're just talking to camera and they're just talking about their, in today's session, we were talking about this and this came up and this was the issue and this particular dog did this and we had to train them out of it. So they're talking about that. And let's say, 80 people watch it. But they keep doing it and eventually 400 people watch it and eventually 1,000 people watch it. So they're slowly building. You just never know what's going to come from that. If I got someone to eventually speak in front of an actual physical audience of 1,000 people, someone in the audience wants to do something. Like if you were to literally stand in front of this audience of 1,000 people and just talk about who you are and what you do, one person in that audience will say, I have an idea that I'd really like to run past you because I want this to happen. So you just never know. So for about way back in 2010, I wrote the book Key Person of Influence about personal brand. And in the first year, I don't know, we probably sold 10,000 copies or something like that and gave away a bunch of copies. And for, I think, 12 years, I just kept talking about how you position yourself as a key person of influence. And I kept writing books and I kept putting little bits out there. And I built a personal brand that on some platforms had 20,000, which was pretty cool at the time. And on another platform, I might have had 10,000 people. And I'm running 7-figure and 8-figure businesses. I'm doing well in business and everything's going great. And I've got what I thought to be pretty cool, tens of thousands of followers going into the pandemic. And then one day, Chris Doe sees my content and reads my book and says, do you want to come on my podcast? Ali Abdaal reads my book and sees my content. This is in the early 2020s, 10 years after I wrote the book. And then he says, I'll come on the podcast. And then Stephen Bartlett sees the Ali Abdaal podcast and I'm skiing one day and I get this message from Stephen Bartlett saying, hey, I've just discovered all your content. Do you want to come on the show and talk about all things entrepreneurship? Okay. And then he's had me back 6 times and millions of views and hundreds of thousands of followers. But it's like there's no way I could have predicted that. In fact, a month before he reached out to me, I was in Dubai and a friend of mine said, "Oh, you're going to end up on one of those big podcasts like Diary of a CEO." And I said, "There's absolutely no chance of that happening." And a month later, he reached out.
It's insane I say this to people as well. Even if it's just establishing a handle, I hate it when people, myself included, I pretty much hate everything I was when I was younger, but people try and pigeonhole their career into their handle. I say, get as close to your name as possible. Being James Smith was difficult. And the person that had James Smith was also a personal trainer from the same county. So I was like, brilliant. But the way it only makes sense in retrospect when you look back at your career that you go, okay, well, that makes sense. And this happens and this happened, this happened. There's something called the end of history illusion, where people seem to think that they're a finished product in time up until the point they're at. But the only way they can truly appreciate how much they can change in the next 10 years is to look at the last 10 years. So if you look at where you were 10 years ago today, and you look at all the achievements and breakthroughs and podcasts and everything you've done to this point, if you flip it on its head, that's the only way you can get an accurate representation of how much could be coming ahead, which could be quite frightening for a lot of people. But I like to remind people that we all go through life thinking that we're a finished product, that we're not going to get smarter, we're not going to become more entrepreneurial, we're not going to be able to achieve much more than what we're doing now. But then if we look back, we've done so much in 10 years, there's no reason we can't flip that.
It gets even more exciting than that, or scary, depending on how you look. When we're in bell curves, we assume that if I do the work, I'll end up with the average of the industry and all that sort of stuff. So if I qualify as a personal trainer, the average personal trainer makes £45,000, so I'm going to get £45,000. That's bell curve thinking. The way it works online, which is power law thinking, is, and it sucks, but it's amazing and it's weird. At the 50th percentile, you're getting almost no feedback from market. That you're literally halfway into the power law. You're about average. You're in the middle of this, and you get almost no results. You get, let's say, you get £500 a month. Now, when you get to the 90th percentile, you might get 1,000 a month, like next to nothing on these power laws. As you tip over the 10th percentile, it goes 1,000. 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000, 32,000. As you get to the top 5%, 64,000 a month, 125,000 a month, 250,000 a month. And now as you get to the top 1%, it's 1 million a month, 2 million a month, 4 million a month. So these power laws, all the results end up in the top 10%. And the thing that really sucks is that moving from the 50th percentile to the 90th percentile gives you almost no signal that you're actually on the right path. So
the period that most people give up.
Yeah, and that's where most people give up. And then if you can just tip the top 10%, you just it's wild and it's explosive. Your dream revenue becomes your dream like your average profit. What most people do in a year, you might do in a week or a month. What most people might experience in years of their career, you might happen every single month. So when it pops, it really pops, and it's wild. As you've experienced, it's unbelievable what shows up in your life when you just tip over that top 10%.
That's why I think a lot of the time I like to remind people to become process orientated, not outcome orientated. Anything beyond, I'm a little dopamine junkie on social media, and really my job is just sending people to websites. People go, "You're a digital marketer." I'm like, trust me, I just send people to websites, and I just focus on that.
You're a link pusher.
That's it. I keep my little blind, what do they call it on horses where they can't
Blinders.
see? That's it. I just look down at that, don't get carried away, because otherwise you can get equally motivated but deflated. One question I'd have for you, which I didn't know if I was going to ask, was remaining motivated. Now, any person that's experienced making money, wealth, selling businesses, exiting or whatever, how do you remain motivated? Because I think that when you're in the infancy in a career, you think money is going to make you happy. And it does relieve a lot of stress. But a lot of people, when they get to that stage, I don't know about yourself, I can sometimes feel numb to it. And I'm not sure if entrepreneurs or even people that are business-minded explain enough about how quickly you become accustomed to that bell curve of success at the top. So you say there, 16, 32, 64, etc. And people listening will go, oh my God, they think that their happiness will go along with it. They will think that, okay, as my revenue increases, bump to bump, my happiness will go with it. And what you actually see is that more humanized, linear, and flat out. How do you navigate that? You are further ahead in your journey than I am. Do you ever have any systems, struggles, days?
Well, yeah, for sure. And that very human experience is something that you also self-loathe over. You also hate yourself for that because you go, why am I not ecstatic? Like you got to remind yourself, be ecstatic, man. Like, in the last month, I went to LA and did Diary of a CEO, and then I flew back to London for 6 hours and did something in 6 hours. And then I went to Dubai, and then I was down in Mauritius for 2 weeks at an amazing hotel. And then I came back through Dubai for 4 days, and then I went off to Amsterdam. And that's just my month. And it's like all this fun stuff, and I'm speaking and I'm getting paid crazy amounts of money and having a great time and flying all, business class and all that, taking the whole family with me where I'm going. So it's like, dude, be happy. Like, whatever gripe you've got, get over it real fast, right? And you self-loathe over the fact that you go, this is silly not to be happy. The way motivation happens, it's environment. Environment dictates performance. We're environmental creatures. So when you are in an environment, like for example, if you're earning $50,000 a year and all your friends are on $30,000 a year, you're just sitting there going, I'm king of the kids and this is great. You get if you get 10 friends who are all on $1 million a year, you're freaking out. You're like, what the heck? Why am I doing so badly? So environment dictates performance. You really want to try and create an environment that creates the motivation. And motivation, I think there are positive motivators, but actually negative motivators are probably more effective. So like, for example, when I started my first company 20 plus years ago, I put all the startup costs on my Amex, and my Amex was 55 days of interest free and then like 128% interest annualized or whatever. And it was like, really dangerous. But man, was that motivating. Like I had $28,000 worth of limit on my 2 credit cards. And I just went all the startup expenses, ads in the paper, everything. And then I timed it so I had 55 days to make enough sales to clear the credit card. And it was just like there was just the concept of a weekend didn't exist because I was just freaking out about clearing the credit card in that amount of time. So, that's one. When you have kids, you've got this new factor in your environment that I am now provider for this family. Like if I don't do my job, then what if I don't put food in the fridge, right? So there's this new environmental factor. If you take on a commitment to a charity and you actually publicly declare, I'm going to raise $5,000 for this charity, you've now put your reputation on the line for doing that. So you can introduce that into your environment where you now have reputational angst about doing the work. And you might say, for every client I sign up, $500 goes for charity. So I'm signing up 10 clients or else I've not made my public commitment. If you sign up to something like one of the things I used to do early on was I would block out my holidays first, and I would actually, back in the day of travel agents, I'd contact the travel agent and say, these are the holidays that I want to do. Here's the non-refundable deposit. And I'd put down like $2,500 and I'd have $10,000 to pay. And it was like, okay, that's now has to happen. So I find that we tend to rise to challenges. We don't tend to create great, amazing things out of like the perfect, comfortable environment. Like sitting on a beanbag doesn't normally elicit a great idea, but having to have a great idea typically does.
I find that one of the things in the digital age, especially at the moment, is now I look back at times in my life where I was less busy and I look, there was a guy that could enjoy the weekend. Yesterday the sun was out. I thought I'm going to put a towel down in my parents' garden. I'm going to chill for half an hour. Before I know it, I'm doing things. I'm in different chat variations. How do you make sure that you have time off? Is it a phone out the room job?
Yeah, sometimes phone out the room, sometimes blocking it in the diary, all of that. I'm not particularly trying to have a lot of time off at the moment. This really, really sucks. It really sucks, but this is not the time to have time off. You need to work as hard as you possibly can without burning out, because we're going through this, like I started the podcast with, we are going through massive transformation and change. If a tsunami was about to hit the shore, you don't have time off. You move your family out of the way of the tsunami. You get as to higher ground as you possibly can. Every step counts. So I built a business from 2010 to 2020, and part of that building that business was taking on a massive loan and repaying it for 5 years. And that I was so exhausted from paying that loan because it was just like around my neck for 60 payments. And the final payment was March 2020. Do you remember March 2020?
Yeah, I was dancing on tables in Bali, and my manager messages me going, "Stop having fun. People are dying."
Yeah, it's all world's going to go to custard, right? So I finally make the last payment March 2020, and then suddenly it's lockdowns, and the government says you can take out 150,000 loan, and you can this bounce back loan, and you can use this for digital transformation. No sooner had I finally got to the point where I could relax all that money that I was paying towards the loan. I was planning on taking that and just having a much easier life, but I was like, this is not the time for that. So I took the 150 grand loan from the government and we put it into immediate action to take all of our programs online and do all the digital transformation. And then boom, we transformed the business. But the business doubled and quadrupled its profitability. So it was the best thing I'd ever done. And I didn't even have to leave the house to make more profit than I'd ever made traveling around. So it was actually worth doing. And no sooner had we actually delivered that transformation, it was working, November 2022 rocks around. Oh, this is this little thing called ChatGPT 3. And I remember looking at ChatGPT and I got hit by this. It hit me hard when I got it to produce some legal contracts that I'd paid $20,000 for to real lawyers, and it produced pretty much the same contracts. I spoke to it like it was a lawyer, and it was updating contracts. I put documents in there and said, give me the loopholes, and it says, here's the loopholes. I started putting marketing content in there, and it started coming up with better hooks and better headlines and all this sort of stuff. This was GPT-3. And I asked it medical questions, and it gave me the same sort of stuff. And I'm sitting there going, what is everyone going to do? I remember walking down Putney High Street in a daze, like just my head spinning, thinking, what is everyone going to do? Like looking at people walking around me, going, you don't know what's just happened. Like your life is going to fundamentally change. And I also realized I am now going to have to paddle like crazy again. This is not the time to rest. This is the time to surf this wave. There is a big wave coming. I'm going to have to paddle like crazy and surf this thing. I'm going to have to get my family to higher ground. I don't know what my kids are going to do for jobs. I need to create as much wealth as I possibly can so that my kids have houses. Throughout all of human history, most of the last 10,000 years, there was no social mobility. It was only a very recent concept that you could have some little bit of social mobility, that you could be born poor and end up rich. I don't know if that's going to continue after this AI thing. I also don't know whether my kids are going to be personality suitable for this kind of crazy world. I think probably 1% of people are going to generate 99% of the productivity. I don't know if my kids are going to be in that 1% who generate 99% of productivity. So I have this unique moment in time, 5 years, where for the next 5 years, I can get my family to higher ground. I can position our family as a, leader in this space. I can paddle like crazy and then see if I can rest. I'm sure something else will come along, but I can then see, am I able to rest now? But I don't think this is the time. Like for me personally, work as hard as you can without burning out.
That's amazing for me to hear, especially from someone that I would look up to in this space, where sometimes I can think, oh, Daniel is maybe, he doesn't have a mortgage on his house. He finishes work at 3 p.m. We like to paint these pictures of people we look up to and imagine that's where we're working towards. But I said this to my fiance the other day. I said, just give me 3 more years. This is going to suck for 3 years. And I make a point of trying to say to all the people that potentially I help and work with that this is the hardest any of us are going to work. I even say to people, we're training at altitude. There's less air than we've ever had. And all we can hope is that eventually when things maybe normalize, probably a terrible use of the word normalize, that we will be the ones ready to train at altitude. The South African rugby team, I can't remember what ground they have. There's one of their pitches, they can kick the ball further and they'll train at altitude. And when other teams come there, they're absolutely screwed. But I think there's so many people doing that. From the outside, it can look like entrepreneurialism. Some people look at it as greed. Some people look at it as hoarding wealth or whatever it is. But really, it's that deep-rooted psychological tendency to provide for your family, look after them. And I think that the people at the top and at the best will never show people how hard they're working. That's one lesson that I love to say to people. All those people you look up to that you think are working hard, they're working so much harder. Now, that brings me on to one element of this. We had a brief discussion of, before we started going live, family and entrepreneurialism. Some people may look through the lens that family could be a distraction, could be something that gets in the way, it could be something that would hinder entrepreneurialism. in the world going into AI, this realm of declinism, thinking the world could potentially becoming worse, what message would you have to young entrepreneurs about having a family?
Yeah. So having the right spouse and a family is a superpower. If you look at the world's richest people economically, right, the wealthiest 1,000, 2,000 self-made individuals, if it was true that not getting married and not having kids was a really good idea, you would just see a lot of single people who were at the very top of the tree. And that's not what you see. Of all the really, really self-made people, they're typically in a long-term stable marriage. They've on average got about 3 kids. So when you go and have a look at the top of the self-made pile, they're married with kids. And I'm not saying that getting married with kids gets you to the top of the pile, but I'm saying it certainly doesn't stop you from getting to the top of the pile. My personal experience is that my wife is an amazing advisor. She's amazing at holding me to high standards. We work together totally as a team. I'm the front face, but like the two of us are tight on all decisions. And then having kids, elevated purpose, elevated focus, and just also the joy of life resides there. You and I both know people who don't have kids, and no matter what they achieve, it just seems like there's something missing. Whereas once you've got kids, that thing is not missing. We are biologically wired for passing on life force to the next generation. That's what we're wired for. In the same way, if someone said, I've decided that I'm just not going to eat because like eating takes up so much time and eating is such a distraction, it's like we're biologically wired to eat, right? Like that eating is a big part of living. We're also biologically wired to reproduce. We're biologically wired to pass life force forward. My experience is this. My life really took off when I found the right person and we had kids together.
It's important as well that you have people. If you've got a massive team of employees, they're going to say yes to almost everything because their purpose, their job, their income depends on it. And I find that having my partner means I can run ideas past. Should I do this? Should I do that? But the reality is, once you find a good partner, you have to ask permission for everything anyway. Once you have kids, I explain to my friends, I go, having my first child is one of the best things in my life. But the dynamic changes where, you want to have a shower, you need permission. You want to go to the gym, you need permission.
Yeah.
The dynamic changes, but there's nothing better than having these high highs with business, with monthly recurring revenue, whatever it is, than coming home to a family. And I think
and also, the other side of that is that someone says, do you want to come out drinking? And you go, I'm really sorry, I got a little kid. Like we're just at the moment, we're going through some teething issues, literal teething issues. So it gives you a good excuse to stay focused on what you want to stay focused on.
I feel that in this stage of my life, I barely drink anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like I might have this productivity stress, but what you said has validated so much about how I think about the next few years. I see people potentially not making the most out of their time. And I don't think some people appreciate the severity of the time we're going through now.
Yeah.
This is not the time for...
There are times to plant the crops and there are times to enjoy the harvest. This is not the time to enjoy the harvest. This is the time to be planting. You've got to be in alignment with this. This is not what we're going through as a humanity, as a society. We have a window of time. And you miss that window, you're not going to get that window back. And it sucks. Like, I'm exhausted from the last disruption. Like, I've grown multiple companies and multiple teams, and I've taken on debts and paid off debts and expanded into different things and adopted new technologies and had to sit up till 11 o'clock at night on a thing trying to come up with, digital transformational stuff and writing books on deadlines. Like, all of that's exhausting. And I get it. It is exhausting. And no sooner have we finished that, we got another one. But unfortunately, that's just the times we're living in. World War I happened and then World War II happened. And there are a bunch of people who said, another friggin' world war. I'm glad that that's not our issue right now, right? Our 2 world wars is the pandemic and then AI disruption. So for people our age, we're facing 2 back-to-back disruptions, and we've just got to soldier on.
To people listening to this, they go, oh my God, I need to stay informed, stay up to date with everything that's going on to kind of close out this amazing conversation. How can people be kept in the loop? How can they stay on track with all the changes that are happening? How can people make sure they don't fall behind in this revolution?
I think it's really good to join part of a community or a group of people who understand what's going on in the world. They have a context, a shared context for each other's lives, and a shared context of like a thesis as to how the world's moving. And then they form a group of people, or they join a group of people who essentially say, we're going on this journey together. We know that we're being disrupted and we understand it, may or may not like it, but we know we've got to do it. So we're going to go through this and do this together. And if you can be doing this with a cohort, I think the real joy of life is moving through life with a group of people. Like probably the best parts of my life with everything that's gone on and money and fame and all that sort of stuff and achievements, it's actually having a group of people that I'm now moving through life with. There are certain friends in my life who I've known since I was 10. And we're actually still moving, not all of them, but there's a couple that we've gone the distance. We're moving through life together. And I love the idea that we're going to continue moving through life together. There are some people who came into my life very recently in the last couple of years, and I still feel we're going to be moving through life together in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So like, I think the real joy is like picking a cohort of people that you feel like you're on a journey through life together with them. And that we're going to have times where we holiday together. We're going to have times where we share ups and downs. We're going to have our moments of triumph and our moments of disaster. We're going to support each other through it. We're going to bounce ideas and sounding board with each other, and we're going to move through life together. So picking some groups of people where you go, these are the types of people who I want to go and move through this, at least move through this disruption with.
That conversation has been incredibly insightful. I feel validated. I feel like I've got my own little lesson in personal brand and marketing then. I just want to thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers, mate. What a pleasure.
Thank you.